Hello and assalamu alaikum, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to season two of ALUMS Chat. This is a space where we celebrate the stories of our alumni that are redefining leadership and making an impact across the world today. And I'm so very honored to speak with our alumni guest today. This is someone who has gone from managing financial portfolios to managing hope. And not just managing hope, he's managing hope across thousands of classrooms across our country as the president and CEO of the Citizens Foundation, aka TCF, one of Pakistan's most influential nonprofits. And I want you to join me in giving him a very warm welcome. From our MBA class of 1997, we have with us Mr. Zia Akhter Abbas. Zia Sab, a very warm welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, Marwa. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, real joy to be here. Thank you so much.
But Zasab, you're someone that we've wanted to have a conversation like this with for a very long time. And recently, mashallah, we saw your name across headlines in Pakistan, when you stepped into this fantastic new CEO role at TCF. But really, Zasab, आपकी जो story, आपकी जो कहानी है of someone who went from really, like I mean this in kind of a funny way, and also not you went from investment banking to investing in Pakistan's children, really,
Wow.
and that's
Mm.
not an average career pivot at all. It's anything but average. Your story. So we really want to start from the beginnings of your journey. We'll talk about your time at LUMS. And then also all of the years at TCF and the leadership. So सबसे पहले जो है, let's start from the very beginning. So your class of 97, so you joined LUMS in the mid 90s, which was a relatively early time um,
Thank you for
as
making me
well.
feel so young. Thank you.
You look extremely young. We
No,
won't
it's a
talk about the
genetic
years
gift.
since graduation. But उससे पहले, so I'll get to LUMS, but that was an MBA. उससे पहले भी there was your undergrad and your formative years in Pakistan. So थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा बिल्कुल अपने background का बात की थोड़ी सी बातें करें हमें. Tell us where you're originally from. Where did you grow up?
Sure,
And sort of just the early years of your life growing up. What
sure.
were they like?
So, Marwa, I tell people that, this is a really important thing, how you started out, the place, the parents, and the purpose. For me, the place was Tariq Road. And for those of you who are familiar with Karachi, it's a busy commercial area. Chand Raat on Tariq Road is man versus machine, and, it is crazy. And that's where we used to live. But my parents were the most unique part of my journey. So we started out with my father was a very learned man. He was an editor of a labor union magazine, and he worked for PIA. And really, and you can see, piche kaam ho raha hai. So excuse the busy background, but work's
No
got to
worries.
move on in a non-profit. Um, and I have my earliest memories of him were really reading and writing, so we used to have people all over from all over Karachi come to our home, and sitting for for study circles. And because of what he believed in, which is essentially labor rights, he was out of work for a large part of my growing up. It was very hard to compromise, a career of any sort with that kind of belief set. So my mother, who was a social worker, had to become like an entrepreneur by compulsion. She started a small shop, and she kind of ran the house from a financial perspective largely. And imagine this whole mix of why are we doing this? Why are my parents involved in this? Why? And even though she was running the house, she was very proud of my father's beliefs and the work they both were doing. My mother was also a social worker, so she was in education. She was doing fundraising for a small school in Shah Faisal Colony. So I tell her now that whatever you started, I'm just doing it at a different scale. But that was my beginning. And really, if you imagine pivots, the pivot was not so much the career change I did later, but really, as I was growing up, the pivot was really understanding that while I really loved what they were doing, nothing, no jaidad, right? So I had to figure out where the money was going to come from. These guys, their heads were in the cloud, and I could see that this society, there was no romance with being
Mm,
without money. And
yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I could take care of them and myself. So I clearly thought I had to do something. And back then, there were no 1800 career options. There were seven or four, and an MBA was a kind of safe option. So I, like many other people, I just told everyone I'm going to do an MBA. And people who knew me couldn't believe that I was going to do an MBA because of the kind of beliefs I had grown up with.
Mm. And how did LUMS happen, sir? Because so now you're in Karachi and you decide to come to
Yeah.
LUMS for MBA. How does that happen?
Yeah, I'm back in 97, 95, right? So
95, yeah.
it is, alumni का plan होता है.
Mm.
That year, PIA started a scholarship for ex-employees, retired employees, and employees of PIA, their children to get a scholarship to LUMS. I'd hardly heard of LUMS. And because I found out about that scholarship, I literally remember in my interview, in my financial aid interview at LUMS, telling them, "Oh, there's a PIS scholarship," and the guys on the other side of the table didn't know. उनको पता ही नहीं था कि PIA कुछ. So I found out because of that.
Mm.
But I had studied in Canada for 2 years for my IBs at a United World College, and I had gotten a taste of independence and living outside of the home. तो मैंने कहा यार लाहौर में अलग से माँ बाप से दूर थोड़ा सा that age is where you want some independence. So I half of the battle was being away from home, but then also LUMS, the case method, it had a certain seriousness about it, a certain kind of grit and rigor about it, which I felt more than really knew about. And I was right when I came that that was a clear difference in the way LUMS ran its things.
And sir, now when you look back at your time at LUMS, what's a lesson or perhaps multiple lessons that you can trace back to your time that have stayed with you across I would say across your time at the corporate life and at the social impact, something that stayed across the
Mm.
decades.
So I tell everyone I got a lot out of LUMS. It was a big part of my education. But before I tell you that, I also felt really lost when I got to LUMS. My first night, I want to share with you, without ACs in the EDC, they had, it was too early summer orientation program. They hadn't turned the AC plant on. So it was fans and three, four Karachi guys talking about life. And in the first night, I had someone tell me that Karachi में कोई employed नहीं होता. And these guys are all my really dear friends now, so I can say it. Somebody else said that कोई भूखा नहीं सोता कराची में. And I was like, and when I told them about what I believed in about people's, right to a fair wage and the fact that there should be no people in society, they said, आप young हैं, आप idealist हैं, सही हो जाएंगे आप. तो मैं पहली रात तो यही सोचता रहा कि मैं कहाँ आ गया हूँ. and उस वक्त it was okay to say greed is good. Wall Street अगर किसी ने देखी हो, so this was an MBA class which started its 2 years saying, yeah, greed is good and I want to be Gordon Gecko. So it was a very disorienting place for me as well. But LUMS helped me navigate the world. It helped
Mm.
me understand where I could negotiate and be at peace with the rest of this system. It told me where there is actual rigor and analysis required and where there is just a set of assumptions that you need to give its due. It taught me about work ethic and seriousness. In an MBA class, if anybody is out there listening, the first one, the first, the case analysis the written analysis of case that you put in, if the deadline is 11 a.m. and you walk in towards the mailbox, and we had to turn it in physically back in those days, and if you were 30 seconds late, the guy would be walking away with the wax, and it's too bad, too bad. You can't submit. And that level of look, you got to show up, you got to shape up. That really taught us a work ethic, which of course has stayed with me. But I think it also taught me that, the world is not a bad place. People who are involved in corporate or any other pursuit are not bad or inherently sort of misguided. Everyone is the result of their journey. And if I was a quiet guy, so being in a 50% class participation course, I had to learn very quickly to speak up. That was a big deal for me. Learning how to make decisions with ambiguity, with incomplete information, but still making decisions based on whatever information you had. So all of these are really super important to me now in my work, in our organization. And I recommend alums MBA खास तौर पे to everyone I meet, even today, no matter what they want to do in life, because it tells you how to make decisions really well and how to manage yourself and interaction with yourself, with that in the world in a really positive, capable way.
So, I mean, this is a commonality, between Luminites, I think, across generations. जो आपने बात की थी ना अभी के, when you came, you were in a confused, disoriented place, and LUMS was a place that sort of helped you navigate, across the spectrum life, from the workplace to other things, decision making. But आज जब आप when you look back. And because I really loved what you said about how the kind of background you came from as well with social worker parents and the kind of thinking you
Mm-hmm.
had. And you came for that MBA knowing that I'm making a shift in my life. I'm going into a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you look back at that, what do you, what would be sort of your thinking about that kind of decision at that point in your life as someone who then also changed it later on? Because you're somebody who I think went from that social space to the corporate sector and then came back to the social space. So looking back at
Yeah.
that, अब आप उसके बारे में क्या सोचते हैं?
So बड़े मजे की कहानी है ये. For 2 years, I used to tell everyone that I will work, I need to work, but I'll work up to a point. And when I have enough, I will do what I want. And
Yeah.
that was me, let's say 21 years old. And everyone, my hostel friends, everyone is like, yeah, theek hai. Sure. Second, I used to tell everyone for 2 years, I will not work for a multinational and I'll not work for a bank. And I had a full
अच्छा.
plan that I did my internship in an NGO, and I have a full plan that I will find a carve a path which will take me to the nonprofit space. So I
Okay.
come out of lumps and I went straight a beeline to the nonprofits. I went to one or the other. And अल्लाह मियाँ करना ऐसा हुआ कि the ones I went to at that time, somehow the ones I interacted with, I couldn't imagine working there. They were, organizing conferences, they were writing white papers. I asked them what was the work, what was the impact being created. I couldn't really put my finger on it. And that was real disorientation because now you've got this whole arc planned out in your life and now you can't do anything. So one of the other gifts that Lamia has given me is I'm congenitally lazy. And I got a call from Citibank. I was on the dean's list, so they just called all the dean's list people, and they said कि जी आप आ जाएं और आपका इंटरव्यू. मैंने तो अप्लाई नहीं किया. Why are you calling me for an interview? But they did, and I went because I was totally confused, and I said, they won't give me a job, and if they do, I'll park myself. This word that I'll park myself. But you know what these institutions are really good at is they're really good at telling you that you're the best thing since sliced bread, you're God's gift to mankind, you're top talent globally, blah blah blah. And also they're really good at intellectually challenging you. So that part of my life, that part of me, that brain, which was suddenly in charge of $100 million kind of portfolio and talking to really senior stakeholders and making really important decisions, that was all fired up. And I said, अच्छा ठीक है बस एक साल मैं यहाँ गुजारूंगा और फिर I'll get back to it. And then 2 साल हो गए and then 3 साल हो गए. And then responsibilities and life intervenes. And it's a very familiar story. Every year, I would think about what I promised to myself, and I would have a home, a wife, kids, and slowly the responsibilities are accumulating around the time. And there's a real kind of mechanics to how I've seen not just myself but other people navigate this kind of tension in their life, what they want to do and what they are doing, this cognitive dissonance. And I really feel we should talk more about it and get to realize that we are not alone in this. There are lots of people who come through this and get, in various ways. It's not that everyone wants to do nonprofit work. They may want to do their art, or they may want to run their business, or whatever. But this cognitive dissonance is normal. And back when we were starting our careers, it was not normal to switch, to imagine multiple careers in a lifetime. And now it is not just multiple careers in a lifetime, but multiple careers at a single time. People have different aspects of their life that they. So Alhamdulillah, I think we're in a world where a lot more is possible. But I was very confused when I came out, and the 1 or 2 years turned into 10 years at Citibank, and then I moved to another bank, and I went abroad and came back. And in the end, it was I was at closing up to 40 when I said, "This is it. You don't want to do what these banks are giving you. You've checked out mentally. There's a point at which you are no longer playing in the game that somebody has set up for you, but you are part of writing the rules for the game now. It is a game.
Yeah.
Most of us who get into senior levels will, I think, agree with me when I say, after a point, you're not working for the money. After a point, you're keeping score and you're competing with either yourself or the next guy, and money becomes a score, but there are other like bells and
Factors.
whistles, right? I want that market. If only I was the head of this, if I was only band X. Um, and once you dissociate from that game, then it's very easy. It's actually very hard to stay around if you've seen through. It's like watching The Matrix and you turn off the movie, and then you look around and you're like, is this all real? Right? It's almost like that when you realize that a career is a bit of a gamification of things. So I was in banks where I was deciding, let's not just have six grades, let's have 14 grades, and we'll give promotions to people every year. And we did that, and people were so motivated. And you'd be like, is that how easy it is? And you'd feel horrible about it, but you'd also feel, oh, this is management. And so you stop playing the game after a point, and once you've done that, it is much easier to look around and be, like, dispassionately kind of being able to analyze what your options are. Sorry, there's a long answer to your
No,
question.
no, it was a fantastic answer. There was so many parts of it actually that I want to dive into more. Zasab, I really liked how you kind of explained the cognitive dissonance that was a little bit rarer in your time, but is exactly as you put it, so very common today. I think so many people listening will relate to this aspect of, and I always describe it in a way that how the younger generation thinks of it in a way that how do we combine purpose with profit in our lives? That there's
Mhm.
no other way for, to explain it the way you did. And going back to something you also, so authentically shared that early in your career, you realized looking at your parents, I need the profit in my life. I need it
Mhm.
for the kids and the house and the trajectory
Yeah.
of what our lives demand, but you always had the desire for the purpose at the back of your head. And so you were able to make that step 17 years on. But I'm going to ask you two things, right? And I wanted you to tell me a little bit about what happened at that 17 years mark in banking that finally made you jump ship and you went to TCF. And then also if you could share a little bit on bringing it into that broader spectrum of जो मैं आपसे पूछ रही हूँ कि based on your own experience, uh, how do you advise ये जो younger generation है जो ये बात सोचती कि हम अपनी जिंदगियों में इन दो चीजों को कैसे combine करें based on your own
Mhm.
experience? I want you to tell me about both of those things.
So there's a real, um, there's real attraction or incentive, or almost it's very easy to make it sound like a grand kind of personal gesture. In any decision like this, there are push and pull factors, right? Some things is pulling you towards it, and some things are, not sitting well with you. So I think I checked out of my career much earlier than I left. I checked out of my career, I think, when I came back to Pakistan. My father passed away, and I could not imagine. I think I was 30 something, 2006. And I had my two girls in Dubai, and we were just settled. I think the next step logically in my career was that I would go to New York or London. I was doing well. They'd given me credit limits, the whole thing. My father passed away, and I said, and then my mother was trying to make me not feel burdened about being away from Pakistan. And I could see that she was not happy being in Dubai for whatever extent of time I could pull her into Dubai. And I asked myself, right, what would I say or what would I think if I saw someone else do this, uproot their mother at this age? And it made no sense to me. Like, they've done everything for me throughout their life, they've worked hard. What is the next step? Should I take her to New York when nobody even speaks her language? How is this going to work? And at that point, you need a family who sees through things the way you were seeing them and who was supportive. So Amna, who was my wife and my LUMS classmate, I tell people this is one of the big things that I went to LUMS for, essentially, to find Amna. So she was. It took her a second to say, "What are we doing here? Let's go back." So I think that's when I checked out because then the trajectory propels you to the next promotion and the next market, and when you come back you're checked out of that whole track. So I then tried my best to bring my purpose or my hankering for purpose to banking. So for 4 years, I was part of a business in a local bank where we were, I mean, in a sense, it was local. It was a very small bank, but we were trying to do something like microfinance to give credit to people who had no collateral, no credit history, um, nobody else would lend to them. And I thought that we could really, really do it. And a lot of learning for me personally of how I would have done things differently. But one of the learnings for me, which was also true, which I couldn't have controlled, was that intent really matters. In the end, the core incentives at the heart of the enterprise really, and not expect a corporation to have limitless risk appetite and limitless patience for profit or for even a break even. And they're right. So for me to try and play out my purpose playing hockey on a, so I actually went from that bank to a learning institute. I went to head the learning academy at Standard Chartered. I didn't go back to business. I was the business head. I was managing about 2,500 people at NIB. I was about 100 branches. When I left that, and it was a big failure for me in my life, I was totally zonked. I how to do banking better. And so I parked myself in a learning academy. And eventually the business and Standard Chart said, no, 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 you got to come back to business. So all of these things made it clear for me that I was not cut out for this playing field that I was in. So it's important for people to understand it's not a heroic gesture for somebody to just walk away from something. There's always some very real sort of discomfort or mismatch which makes you think about it. But then TCF, I tell people I wouldn't have come for the sector. I came for this tree. It is a place where you can be totally driven by emotion, cause, connect, sort of why and your purpose, and do things in a very professional, a fact-based, strategic way. And that marriage things in the real world, how to manage things, but really doing it for Allah ki raza and doing it for the kid who in the end will transform his or her life and the family's life and the community's life. And we're seeing it happen. This is a unique place in that sense. So I and my wife had started getting engaged with TCF when I was still 25. And she started volunteering for it full time. And I kind of watched it from a distance. And I was feeling very jealous. I'm like, ये क्या तरीका है? I mean, you're getting all the fun, and I'm having to go work in a bank. So I gave myself the deadline, and I had no inkling that I'd be working for TCA. But I gave myself a deadline that when I turn 40, I'll either shut up or I'll start doing what I want to do. And I turned 40, and the next day came, and the next day came, and I hadn't done anything. And I started getting physically stressed out and sick. because of the pressure I was putting on myself. I went for Hajj. I prayed like anything. कि अल्लाह मियाँ कोई रास्ता दिखा दे. And then one day it just occurred to me, and not to me, but us, my wife and I, that this is a trap. So I calculated for the first time. We are very blessed in Pakistan. Those of us who've made it, we don't count our blessings, and we have really very little to complain about. So if you're a senior banker, you don't really have to figure out what your budget is. पैसा आता है आपके अकाउंट में, you live really well, there's still some money left over, sweep it aside to your savings and move on. So you don't know how much it costs to run your life. So I did my math for the first time at 40, and I went to the CEO of TCF, who was a friend by then, to his house on a Sunday. I said, "Azhar साहब, ये मेरा number है. If you guys can give me anything close to this post tax, I'll come work for you tomorrow. You can make me do anything. I can run admin for you, whatever. Just don't make me do fundraising, because I haven't sold a thing in my life, and I can't sell anything, and please don't make me ask for money." And they said, "That's the only job we have." But before we get talk about jobs, they for a month they tried to talk me out of it. "You're too young. What are you talking about? You can't live on this much." Blah blah blah. When they realized I was serious, they said, "Ah, तो फिर आप आके fundraising करें." And so that's what I've done for the last 10 years. Tried to stumble through. Um, there are some things that you have to figure out. Where will you live? Right? So house is really important. In Pakistan, we are blessed to have a lot of equity in our houses, and families give on the houses too. So that is a big deal. I wasn't, so I had to build my own house, but Alhamdulillah, I could by 40. Second was, do I want a lifestyle change for my family? And you have to be comfortable with the answer. It's okay if you do. I was I didn't want my decision to impact my kids, their schooling, and apart from vacations, which I haven't really taken a lot of in the last 10 years, nothing else changed in my life because of this. So I want to talk about it a little openly because people don't realize you live well, Alhamdulillah, right? It's a job, you get a salary. I'm not volunteering full time. It's a very blessed life. But you also get to go home feeling like you're on top of the world, and you get to see the real impact of your work every day in the lives of other people, not just, the careers of other people or the incomes of other people. So that is a huge privilege. And anybody who's associated with any nonprofit will tell you it is like a tika of motivation, like every day. And people work for that. It's not just me. People work for purpose. People work for. It's a misconception that people essentially work for money. Nobody really works for money. They have to have money. Sorry, again, long answer.
No, I asked you two questions. I think it was a one. And thank you so much for being so open about it, because I think that again, this is a huge factor that, as you said, people don't openly talk about, but the actual logistics and acceptance of understanding what you will perhaps give up for going into a direction like this. And it's wonderful to also hear that it's actually not that much of a huge difference. As
Mm,
perhaps we've all maybe hyped it up to be, in our minds.
yes,
And
yes.
maybe some blame to the corporate sector as well for really, really sort of presenting the kind of fast-paced luxury that is now associated with it. But something that I really loved about what you said, where so you were someone, sir, जिसके back of the mind पे seeds तो बचपन से planted थी, of course through your parents, but आपके back of mind में हमेशा से था. And as you said, it got to a point where it was almost physically manifesting in you. You were feeling stressed, and
Mm,
and so you made that shift. But something that I loved about when you were sharing this journey of yours is that TCF became the perfect place for someone like you, because it had that work ethic and the professionalism,
mm,
and it had that purpose that you were looking for. Um, so now, as someone who'd been a leader in a space like banking, and it did be up leadership position where and you have been for 10 years, what was a very different change or shift in your mindset that you bring and that you were able to bring? And what was something that was actually quite common? Because you've reflected on
mm,
both. So
mm.
so in the 10 years at TCF, what are two things that you can tell
Sure.
me? Yeah.
So that's a really good question. I walked in not knowing that I had hardened in many ways. I thought I was the same Zia Akhter Abbas, you know. And but banking, anything you're in, hardens you or shapes you the way it is. If you so my first few conversations with my new boss were about, choti choti, like in a bank, when you're deciding increments at a senior level, your management team, you're deciding increments, you say, top performer, give them massive increments, and then the next rating, you give them quite a bit less, and then sort of middle of the ground, you give them like the base increment, and the last worst performing, you want them out. In a typical bank, you'd say, don't give them in. Give them like something really horrible so that they'll leave. When I saw the increment curve at TCF, I walked into my boss's office. I'm like, what is this? This is like a flat curve. And you're not really incentivizing performance, right? And for anyone who knows Asad Saab, he's a very mild guy. So he smiled and he said, sit down. and he said, क्या हक नहीं है उनको जीने का जो बुरी परफॉर्मेंस कर रहे हैं उनको इन्फ्लेशन नहीं हिट कर रही like they have to live as well. And it's not like he didn't understand. He was from BP and Shell and he'd worked all over the world. So he understood exactly what I was saying. But he was giving me a counter view of the world, which I had not really, I had forgotten. I was a labor rights guy, remember? And I felt very small, but I also felt very energized because the place allowed you to be human and made business decision on consideration like on the human. Um, this was some of the initial experiences. I think the biggest thing that I feel I've gotten out of this place, which is totally different from my banking spaces. I was a risk manager for most of my early career. You start seeing what could go wrong. So my first conversations with some of the founders of TCF was, what have you guys done? You don't have an endowment of any real size. If tomorrow something, the funding stopped significantly, you'd be out of business. This is irresponsible and stuff like that. Um, so there is a certain element of fear which drives our behavior in corporate work. And this is not necessarily true for entrepreneurship, but in corporations, there is a certain amount of do not let what is happening, dwindle away or erode at any cost. Here, we are firing an arrow into the void, and we know that it will land in a place where we will not be alive. It is a very long-term journey. We are talking about 11 years just to get a child to 11 to 10th grade, and then he or he just starts their life. And when they're able to change their lives and their household and their community, and inshallah, the country and the world, you will not be there to witness it. But you have to have then a certain degree of confidence, which corporations do not allow or engender. So, the first time I went to one of my founders and said, I want the tagline to TCF, something like, inspiring hope through education. One of my founders, Atid Riaz Saab, he was very quiet and he didn't seem very jazzed, very energized by that line. Like, "Aapko achhi nahi lagi, hope is such a strong word." And he said, no, hope is really not such a strong. And I was very puzzled. And he said, "Dekhe, hope is just you attaching some probability that something good might happen. And you hope that it will happen. But when you are this capable and when you're working completely at 101%, and when you're doing God's work, and when the world is coming together around you and helping you do it, why do you have any doubt that this will have the effect that you want to see in them? You have to have complete belief that this will happen tomorrow. So, this sense of abundance rather than scarcity, this sense of opportunity instead of risk. In fact, hope is the first threshold, and then you say, okay, I dream something amazing. And then you say, I'm certain, right? I'm certain that this laptop is in front of me because I can see and touch it. Belief is the next level. And I'm not just mean belief in a religious way. I mean belief in this has to happen, but I can't see it today. And I'm still as certain that it will happen. So you work like that, then, right? And you're not afraid. So coming back to things like sustainability, you do have a very clear managerial vision of how to ensure sustainability, but you don't try and look for it in money in the bank. Sustainability for me and for TCF right now is, does our community believe in us? Are we doing the work that is aligned with their expectations of us, both on one side, the parent and the child, and on the other side, the donor? Are we truly deserving of their zakat and their donations? Are we capable enough to go from manual letters of request to the cutting edge digital tools of fundraising? Right? Are we savvy? If all of those are yes, then you are sustainable. And if you've got tons of money in the bank, but tomorrow you break somebody's trust, then nothing in the world can save you as a nonprofit. So we see sustainability in a different way. And coming back to your question, this mindset is not a corporate mindset. It will be laughed at in a corporation. So to have a space where people can bring that kind of view, bring their whole self into the boardroom, we're crazy. We sometimes break into tears when we are having a management conversation. Um, that kind of space and being able to scale it to 20 to 23,000 people. That's the scale of TCF today, right? You walk into any school and you talk to a teacher or a principal and you ask them about the institution, and Alhamdulillah, they'll say it is a family. Lots of people say, don't call corporations families, don't call your colleagues family. I don't know what else to call this because I genuinely feel connected to people I've never met. When I walk into a school and they see me, we talk, we share core values. And that is a very different kind of management. I'll pause.
No, absolutely. Like, I mean, I think I really like the fact that you said you share core values because I was going to say that, I mean, really you basically cultivating you all have the same conviction. You're working for
Mm,
the same conviction, you know. I mean, that kind of belief. And it's a fantastic way, I think, of describing the mindset because I think corporate में तो खैर बिल्कुल भी this is not at all, I think, the mindset that would be there, but it's wonderful to hear it in terms of you describing it in the ideology of how you work and
mm,
also your leadership because I was going to
mm,
ask you this that you know I read this about you as well that you know Zia Saab has a values based leadership style, you know, and I read this multiple places, I have to tell you, and I was going to ask you कि Zia Saab, what does that mean? What is values
mm,
based leadership? And I think that आपने उसकी बहुत अच्छी kind of थोड़ा सा एक reflection दिया है. But if you could
mm,
tell me a little bit more about this, that now, I mean, you've been doing this for 10 years and now mashallah, you're president. So you have a whole other journey of, you know, strength and leadership ahead of
mm,
you. And you've described it fantastically how these 22,000 people all have, you think that without meeting them, you all have that. So ये
mm,
values based leadership इसका आपके लिए
mm.
क्या मतलब है फ्यूचर के लिए?
So I do want to say intent is everything. We have kind of really adopted it here in TCF, but this is not just for TCF. It's not just for nonprofits. It's not just for senior leadership. You have to decide how you're going to live your life. You have to be able. So the number one regret of the dying, right? Everybody's come across those reels and maybe the book as well. The number one regret of the dying is that I lived my life according to the expectations of other people and did not have the courage to live my life the way I truly wanted to. What is it that one truly wants to do? One wants to be at peace with oneself, first of all. One wants to be true to oneself, right? And then you have questions like, what did you do with this time that you have? So one answer is I sold credit cards, right? And it's okay. I sold soap. I manage people's money. It's okay. I think there is, I'm built a community or I raised great children. All of these are, alhamdulillah, but as long as you're okay with the answer that you can imagine yourself giving 20, 30 years down the road on your deathbed, then it's okay. So values-based leadership se bhi pehle, it's like values-based life, right? So are you the person who are working in a bank? So I remember I came into a new bank. They were about to launch a product. I said, you can't launch this product. They said, we've spent $200,000 on developing the system for this. It's done. Just sign it here. I said, you can launch it. I'm not going to sign because it is predatory. It literally, behaviorally, people will start getting into a debt trap. And not only will you be doing something that the regulator doesn't like, but it's fundamentally not a nice thing to do to other human beings, right? You'll make tons of money. I just didn't sign it. I got onto a call with the regional person who was literally on the call. She was like, who is this person? Who does he think he is when how can he stop? And then eventually it crescendoed into a very big meeting with very senior regional heads, this, that, whatever. I told them this is why I'm not signing it. They agreed with me. We didn't launch the product. Everybody else felt a little, what just happened here? Because they felt that I was doing something non-savvy or not business-like. But if you're willing to sort of be comfortable with yourself, you can get out of one bank and go to another bank. You can get out of PNG and go to Unilever. The life is not going to end and nobody's going to fire you because you took a position on something which is that not in today's world anyway, right? So I think we should be just more willing to live by our values. Here, we try and create a space in the senior, and I didn't bring values-based leadership at all to TCF. TCF's founders, TCF CEO for 16 years, everyone at the most junior level is able to question authority and say no to things if they are not at peace with it. And that kind of culture, I'm not trying to idealize it. I'm not trying to paint a very rosy picture of it, which is not true, but genuinely, I have said in TCF that I will not sign up for this grant. In that particular case, it was a $3 million grant, which is a massive amount of money for a nonprofit, especially in the middle of COVID. And I said, I don't think we will really use this money well. I mean, they trust us a lot to just give us this money, but I don't think they really understand our capability level to use this money judiciously. And I don't feel good. I think somebody else who use this money better should use this money. And they rolled back. By they, I mean my boss, the CEO, the board, the founders, they rolled back their conversations. They listened to me and we didn't take the money. And I felt so, isko urdu mein kehte hain, chauda, right? I felt like, wow, what a place where you can just, you can put your thing on the table and they'll listen to you. And if you make sense, then they will go with what you're saying. And so now, then I have a different level of ownership, right? Then I walk around and picking up pieces of paper from the ground because I own this place, right? Not as the leader, I own this place, but as a member of the team, I own this place. So I feel everyone can do it in any enterprise, not even in a company, but in any enterprise. And the more you model that behavior, everyone feels liberated to follow and be like that. Everyone wants to do it. Everyone feels cognitive dissonance when they do things that they don't believe in. So I think the more we call it out and just be ourselves, I think we just encourage other people to also do it.
And I was going to ask you, because we were on the track of leadership, I was going to ask you, from a very realistic perspective, when you have teams of people under you in nonprofit sectors where you're traditionally, resource constrained and in challenging environments, I was going to ask you, okay, how do you keep those teams motivated? But I think that what you just explained was perhaps the most, I think that could have been perhaps the most realistic and true explanation of this is because they feel a sense of ownership in the work. I mean, is that a correct
It is. And
yeah?
it's not just corporate speak. It's not just, oh, you guys are owners, you guys are family.
Yeah.
It literally is that if I, as a CEO, go to a school and I'm sitting with the principal and the teachers, they should feel comfortable, not just empowered with shaking hands, but comfortable in telling me how we're going wrong. And if you see that, if you witness that in TCF, you'll find senior leaders, chief CEO, chief operating officer, head of design, walking into a school and being seriously challenged. walking into I was doing sessions like this with the head office team. I'm just new, so I'm communicating with people and trying to hear and listen and learn. They told me some really tough stuff about how the organization is failing in some respects, and we fail all the time. So if you feel that you can do that, you create ownership. If you feel that what you said actually turns into action and there is a response to it, then you feel even more ownership. People, like I said, don't work for money. They work for autonomy. There's this whole piece of research on autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So when you come to TCF, you check in, you've got purpose, right? That's ticked off. Can we create a culture with autonomy and with mastery? Can we create a culture where people try and do intrinsically try and do better and better to serve the people we're trying to serve? And can we create a culture? And we fail at this today. I want to say this. We are a huge organization, so there are lots of things that we don't do well. But one of the things that we do well is that we've been able to tell them if we fail, we will honestly, with authenticity, try and do better. And you please point it out. And that's all we can promise, right? We can't promise to be perfect. So I think that is a big deal of how big part of how people stay motivated in TCS, especially.
And when you were telling me the story of how you got that $3 million deal and how it wasn't the right time and you
Hmm.
couldn't get those funds to be used judiciously and decision to go back. मुझे थोड़ी हंसी आ रही थी because I was going to say कि मतलब sir, they hired you for fundraising and you were doing
कुछ
the
सोचे
opposite of of the job that required of you.
Yeah.
But going back to जो आपने शुरू में भी बात बताई that you said कि मेरे से कोई भी काम करवा ले fundraising ना करवाएं and they said नहीं
Right.
हमें यही करवाना है and that's exactly what you've been doing. I mean the fancy word of
Right.
that is कि you've been doing global resource mobilization for TCF for the
Right.
last 10 years, but really that means that you have volunteers across 14 countries and you have fundraised for 10 years.
Right.
And I'm going to bring it down to a really basic level of question here, but really honestly, Ziasab, you took on something that you had not done before and you didn't even want to do it, but they said, no, this is the task.
Hmm.
बहुत एक relatable सी चीज है, I think, for anyone listening right now, that how to learn to do something that we have not done before and we are given the
Hmm.
task to do it and we believe in the purpose of it, but we haven't done it before. So from your own experience, how do you take that on and then how do you go on to become
Sure.
successful at it?
Yeah. So, good question, actually. When I came into the role, we were about 1.5 billion in terms of fundraising. Today, we are nearing 10 times that, roughly. And it's got nothing to do, or very little to do with me. I'll explain how we fundraise. Because fundraising is also, and running nonprofits is also a little bit of black box, and people think all sorts of things about it. Um, I am good at a few things, and I really am not good at other things. One of the things that I am not good at is to be able to make small talk and to be the relationship manager and to kind of walk into a room and quickly connect with lots of people um, even if I sometimes figure out how to do it, it is at the cost of massive amounts of energy personally, right? I'm fundamentally an introvert. But the job was described like that because at that stage, that's what TCS fundraising was. It was you got to find major donors, you got to manage those relationships, you got to bring in the money. I realized that even if we do everything, we cannot scale fundraising that way because the speed with which the organization was growing will need us to scale at a much faster pace than any amount of staff that we could hire. So we would need to fundraise through volunteers, which was the core ethos of TCS fundraising to begin with. We would go into a community and ask people to become owners rather than donors. We come in and inhabit the organization, question it, challenge it, own it, just like we would do with employees. And doing that, advocating for and being an ambassador for TCF comes naturally. And in their communities, then they become TCF in Houston and in Lahore and wherever. So that's how we scale our sort of feet on the street or our number of conversations happening out there. So my job, I defined for myself to be able to recruit, engage, serve, manage these stakeholders, and to build the back end systems, which I thought I knew how to do, and the products and the processes and the strategies which would do this at scale. Can we create engagement at scale? Can we create ownership at scale? So I really went about it in a very different way than the way the organization or my seniors explained it to me. But so I played on my strengths. And I think people who essentially spend their life trying to cover up on their weaknesses struggle a lot more than people who just play on their strengths. And once you do that, not only are you comfortable, but then what you do is you compensate for those weaknesses by bringing in people who know those things better than you. So I have around me relationship managers who are way better than me. I could never like dream to be even half as good with people as they are. And I defer to them and I respect them in that space and they understand. So I think in any building any team or building any capability, you got to know what you bring to the table and play on those strengths. Be unafraid to redefine how things are done. If you do have that space and that level of autonomy, they gave me a tremendous amount of autonomy. Uh, Very simple thing. If you're ahead of your numbers, nobody will question you. So make sure, Mr. Keynes said in the long run, we're all dead anyway. So make sure that you're not just solving for the long run. You got to solve for the next quarter. And once you solve for the next quarter, and that quarter is 10% better, then people will invest and give you space, and you can continue to build your long-term dream of how things will pan out. So that's how we did it. We did one quarter, 1 year, one at a time. We had tremendous stresses. There was a time in 2016. This is really important. There's a time when we 25 financial gap that we could not fill in the middle of the year of $5 million. 20%, we didn't know where the money would come from. And I would go home very, very burdened because at that time I remember 200,000 kids, and I felt like I was taking 200,000 kids home with me on my shoulders, and I was failing them all. And again, I had a conversation with one of my founders who said, "आप बहुत थके हुए लग रहे हैं." I was like, "I'm not थका हुआ. I am done. I am burned out. I am beyond hope." He said, "This can only happen if you think you're bringing in the money. If you think you're bringing the money and now the money is not coming in, then yes, it's your failure. But if you believe that your job is to do your best and the money comes here because somebody else wills it, allows it, enables it to come in, then it's not your problem. Liberate yourself from this burden. Do your best, go home, sleep. अगर अल्लाह ने चलाना होगा तो चलाएगा, नहीं चलाना होगा तो बंद हो जाएगा. You did your best anyway. That kind of support then enables you to say, okay, I will run like hell, right? I will do my best, and the rest I'll leave to God. And He has really, protected us and enabled us. Good people keep coming to DCF. Not so good people keep leaving, which is also very important. Alhamdulillah, that's how it's happened.
I have to say that I think that the TCF founders, just through the stories
Yeah,
that you've shared, they sound
yeah,
like, mashallah, very wise and
yeah.
a very wonderful group of Pakistanis. I mean, they've done a service to the country, of course.
And Marwa, they don't even want you to know their names, right? That's
Yeah, I mean,
the atypical part. Like people don't know them. I'm pushed not to talk too much about them by name or to
yeah.
lionize them. That's the imagine in a culture if you can create that level of humility, then every layer feels like, yeah, selflessly, just do your job, do better every day, not about you, not about your ego. And you create a very positive, humble culture.
Zia साहब, I think मैंने शुरू conversation में आपको पहले भी कहा था कि I mean, saying that we have an hour for conversation sounds like it's so much more time than it actually turns out to be, because I mean,
Sure.
TCF की तो हमने भी बात शुरू की है, and I'm
Should
I'm I'm already like I'm trying to uh, punch
wrap things up.
questions together how to pick your brain
Sure.
more quickly. But I will I have to ask you one thing here at this point. I mean, we've talked about the kind of culture, mashallah, that the organization has, and now, I mean, 30 years on, TCF started in 1995, so 30 years on. this is where you are. And at the 30-year mark, mashallah, you are now taking on, you know,
Mhm.
the role of what the future would look like. And for people listening who are not aware, TCF is contributed to now over 2,000 schools in Pakistan. They have volunteers from 14 countries. That's really what global mobilization means, I think. And you have, TCF has this vision for 2030. No, I read this. There's
Mhm.
a strategy 2030. So just
Mhm.
because I do want to ask you, what are
Sure,
you looking at? Where do you want this to go?
sure.
Um,
We are
just
we are a
walk us
real
walk us through that.
cusp. Yeah, we are at a real fork in the road, so to speak. And the first time we came across this was 10 years ago when we crossed the first, big, hairy, audacious goal of building 1,000 schools. This was the dream. It was a statement more than an actual management goal because the founders wanted to get everyone's attention to this problem. They never imagined that we'd actually have 1,000 schools. They say it from their own out. But when we did, you have a problem. What are you going to do now? And so we decided, and Strategy 2030 kind of articulates that TCF will morph from just a schools operator to a platform for change in the education space in Pakistan and enable others who are trying to bring about positive change for education in Pakistan. There are three spaces here. Apart from our own schools, and our own alumni and our communities, which we have direct operations where we do a lot with our alumni. We help them beyond schooling. We give them scholarships. In our communities, we are running everything from vocational training to water shops or whatever, right? There's a lot of current operations, and of course, 300,000 kids in the 2,000 schools, both ours and the states that we run. But beyond this, there are three spaces. One is the public sector where we have all of these schools where parents are still sending their kids, hoping against hope that they'll, leave with some sort of good outcomes for their learning and for their life, and their hopes are being dashed. And what can TCF do to improve those schools? So from running some of those schools, a few hundred of them across Punjab and Sindh, right out to offering our textbooks to them, offering advice and always free kind of support and counsel. You will not hear us talk about it a lot because we want the government to take credit and ownership of all those things. But we do a lot of that over the years. I've done all of that over the years. 46% of children who are in school in Pakistan, however, go to non-state school. This is a very high percentage considering anywhere in the world. And that's because the state has stepped back from its initial promise of providing schooling to every child. And so these low-fee private schools have come in, and despite their efforts, there is a lot of gap in quality of learning outcomes. So today we have a large and very quickly growing part of our work, which is helping those schools improve their learning outcomes. We share with them our books that we've developed over the years. We share with them our teacher training, and over time we'll do even more to improve those schools. And the third is, can we run a large-scale literacy and life skills program for kids who are not finding a space in schools, who are left out of this whole system? And can we give them hope to connect with society in a positive way? So we're running and designing and actually scaling that enterprise. So these three spaces, public sector, private sector, and our school children, is a very large canvas for TCF to try and impact. And that is how we'll get to 2 million lives being impacted by the year 2030, inshallah, in very deep, meaningful ways. Some of it through formal schooling, but also through non-formal schooling and through helping their institutions improve their outcomes and help those individuals.
That sounds doesn't it, it sounds doesn't sound just promising, but I think that 2030 is not that far away, right? It's 5 years
Yeah, it's a
away.
bit daunting
So
as well.
it's I know, don't want to scare you at all. In fact, I was going to say that as Pakistanis, it's always wonderful to hear about a vision like this because I think हम सबका stake है. ऐसे vision
Hmm.
में तो, I mean, the whole country has a
Yeah.
stake in the kind of work that you're doing, and I think that बहुत कम चीजें होती है शायद जिस पे हम सब कह सकते हैं कि we would all like to
Hmm.
watch somebody succeed. But this is the kind of
Hmm.
thing that I think I really
Inshallah.
can speak, inshallah. Um, you know, all of our hopes and prayers, inshallah, for it to succeed in that way. And you know, I have to tell you, Zasa, something on a personal note, that I actually think that I've always associated TCF as one of those organizations now, that, you know, through the work you were doing, which was global mobilization, that for expat Pakistanis, I think it
Mm,
serves as a huge connection uh,
mm.
to their country, to their back home,
It's so
and in
true.
making them feel like they are giving back. Because I can tell you, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and I remember very clearly when I was growing up, even in the early 2000s, or 2003, 2004,
Right.
2005, my parents used to attend and volunteer for TCF fundraisers in the early
Right.
2000s in Saudi Arabia, which is something that I don't think I could have even have understood at that time, which I
Mm.
now look back on. And it's something that I
Mm.
think really allows people to have a stake.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
so,
it.
and
That's
that's
the
the work
word.
you're doing.
It allows them to have a stake in their country. And I want to say, Marwa, they are everywhere you go. I go in the world, you find Pakistanis who have not left emotionally. They have not turned away for whatever compulsion they went abroad. There is a there's a big part of them which is still connected to Pakistan. But how do you do it when you're physically somewhere else, when your kids are grown up in another place, right? How do you reconnect and how do you give back? There are many of them who feel that their education, their early childhood set them up in a way that they are able to really make it abroad. So how do you give back? You know, I want to say this. Sorry, I'm going to take a minute, but the salmon fish. Um, we haven't figured out, science hasn't figured out why and how this little fish goes from a stream to a river and out into the ocean and goes hundreds of miles out into the ocean, and then midway through their life they turn back and start swimming back upstream, and they swim back against the flow of water to the same brook, the same little stream that they were born in. They lay their eggs and they die.
I didn't know
What
that.
is it in their biology which compels them, and to not only compels them but enables them to find that same place? Look it up on YouTube. It's remarkable. So I actually believe that there is an imprint of the place that you grow up on you, and we feel good when we stay connected to it, when we are able to give back to it, when we are able to leave it better than we found it. Of a lot of time, our description of our relationship with Pakistan is, what has Pakistan done for us? Frankly, if we started accounting for it, we'd be shocked. If you look around the world today on how other people like ourselves are being dealt with, Pakistan has given us a lot. But it is not the filter through which you should look at how your relationship with Pakistan is or your home is anywhere. We don't talk about our parents that way. What have they given to us? There is a relationship which is deeper than that, which is because they are your parents. So it's because we are Pakistanis. I feel like one of the things I really want to say is young people, people in LUMS, wherever you go, whatever you do, don't stop looking back. Don't forsake this place. It is very precious. And agar hum nahi karenge to kaun karega, right? So really, really important for us to be absolutely, it sounds corny, but it's very important for us to kind of take that very seriously and embed that in our lives and our children's life because the place really needs it.
I don't think you could have said it better. I think it's not corny at all. I think Zasa, sometimes it matters who's saying it as well. And I think hearing it from somebody
Mm.
like you, um, आज के ज़माने में, when every young person, not just Luminite, but uh,
Yeah.
every person in Pakistan is in that precipice of, should we stay or should we go? Should we
Mm.
stay or should we go? I think those are the words that will felt like balm to my soul, you know, that अगर हम नहीं करेंगे तो
Yeah,
कौन करेगा, right?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and you know that brings me nicely, you know, full circle. I was gonna for people who are listening and who perhaps don't know, Zia Saab's MBA 96, but today his children are also
Mm.
students at LUMS, and he has a full circle moment with LUMS as
Totally.
well. You know, sir, आपके बच्चे भी अब LUMS में पढ़ रहे हैं. So I think it brings me really nicely to what I was going to sort of ask you, and if you could have any lesson or a single piece of advice from your life or your experience that you would give to your kids as well and other Luminites and other young people listening. Maybe even if something you could say to yourself back in the 1995, Zia, who went to LUMS, based on all of this,
Sure.
what would that be?
So I think the my advice to myself would be very simple, like just relax. You're not alone. Everything will be all right. I think that's mostly, I don't want to, I almost said most old people, and I have to check myself. Um, but I'll tell you, I think one of the key things I've found along the way is that the person who has enough is the richest person on earth. Enough is a really important concept, and everyone's enough is different. And if you can figure out what your enough is, because then you say, okay, this much is enough. Not knowing what enough is and always chasing that trucky batti, I need a little bit more, is the surest way of being really regretful when you're going away. And the only thing we really know is that we're going to go away. So really figure out what your enough is and then find it and then move on from it. Second, especially for anybody who wants to change things in Pakistan, learn from people wisdom on the ground, right? Really, I've learned more from parents of our children, from the teachers than any management group. Really, really respect the noise and the reality and the words from the ground. Um, I think what the world is finding out is that change is not just a personal endeavor. You need to build platforms and institutions around which change can happen and change makers can come together. When I meet a group of people in TCF and I look around the room and I only have to say, guys, you do feel like this is a bit of a refuge in a very tough world out there, a very cynical world out there, right? We're all feeling the same thing, and everyone nods their head that, yeah, this is really important. We find each other and we get solace and hope from each other. So building that institution, no matter what it's doing, LUMS, right? Fantastic institution. So many other nonprofits and for-profit, but build an institution which lasts and has a positive culture. If we can do two, three things like this, then change is an organic process which will keep, growing and advancing beyond your life. But I think and the last thing I want to say is people will scare you, right? If I have bought into a story or a narrative for my life, let's say I've moved out, I have to tell myself I had to move out. There was no other option. When I meet a young person who is thinking about it, I have to tell them, yeah, move out, because I have to validate myself. It's nobody's fault, but it is a choice. So just like that, people will scare you into doing the conservative, safe things. Um, Ask yourself, and they'll scare the living daylights out of you. Don't be scared. You have nothing to lose. The only thing you have to lose is the time you have on this planet. That is the only scarce resource you have. And after people have, people like you and me who've had education, we have very little to be scared of. We can always rebuild our lives. So I feel that fear-based and scarcity-based kind of strategies or narratives for your life are the toughest thing. And if we can break free from them, Alhamdulillah, there's so much to do. So yeah, my kids go to a very nice, very free liberal arts kind of LUMS. I went to business school in the late 90s. I cannot say this is the same place. I enjoy being on campus now, hanging out with them. But Alhamdulillah, I think LUMS is super precious. I think it's a fantastic platform. It had a huge impact on my life. I'm hoping we can strengthen it. We can really kind of make more people who deserve to have that kind of education afford it. I think all of that is super important.
Yeah, I hope so, inshallah. I mean, LUMS is also, one of the institutions when you were talking about the kind of institutions we should try and make in Pakistan, जिनका positive
Absolutely.
culture और कोशिश हो. So, LUMS is also one of those few gems actually in the country.
Absolutely.
And very similar, I think very similar to all of the work that you were describing as well. And I think alumni like yourself, I have to tell you the advice that you gave. I will speak on behalf of all younger than myself and young people, and yeah, I will copy your words. No such thing as old people, just just other alumni. But just the kind of advice that I think that made us all feel so much better, and made me look to the future with a lot more hope. Even जो आपने अपने 96 self को advice दी थी ना कि relax and that everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Really, Ziasab, we will all take that to heart
Yeah.
as well. The conversation with you today is it's been a wonderful, wonderful conversation, and I think that it should be compulsive watching for everyone. I think in the young space right now, because I will reiterate something for all of our viewers of how Ziasab explained that we need to define what our enough is, and let's stop there. I think that will be something that we will all hold on to. So Ziasab, thank you so much
Thank you so
for
much.
your time, for your wisdom, for being so open, about your personal experiences with us. And like I said, the entire community wishes you so much luck, inshallah, on
Thank you
this
so much.
this new journey
Thank
as
you so much.
president.
I'm so very grateful for the opportunity, and I had a lovely time and really, really kind of the questions made me think as well. So thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate
you, sir. Thank you so much.
it. Allah Hafiz.
Take care. Thank you. Allah Hafiz. Allah Hafiz.